Testing. Testing.
Hear you. Yeah.
Testing.
That's good.
Well, I want them to hear in the back. Okay, can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. If somebody can't hear while we're speaking, please raise your hand and wave at us and we'll try to talk louder. I want to welcome everybody here. This is a fantastic turnout. We have these story shares mostly at the Senior Citizen Center during the day, and the most we've ever had is 130. And I think there's well over that now, maybe closer to 150. But thank you for coming. My name is Lorraine Stubb, and this is Sally Caliantry. And we have other members here that are going to be running mics, Heidi Croft on this side and Pam Pethigal over here. We also have Mark Dublin, who is videotaping this. So the format, if you've never been to a StoryShare, is that we've put together a PowerPoint with some of our vintage pictures and some history. And Sally and I will talk about what we know, but we're really most interested in what you remember. We draw so many interesting stories from these sessions. So if you have something to say, please raise your hand, even if you're interrupting us, and we'll have a runner go over to you. And we ask that you speak right into the mic so everybody can hear you. And hopefully you don't feel ashamed to say your name or something, because people want to know who's here. These become like kind of a reunion for everybody, and they want to know who they remember. I also want to say, if you don't see a picture in here, it's probably because we don't have it, and we'd love for you to contribute pictures from your own archives. We can scan them at the museum. Just contact us. And I also wanted to say the museum reopens on April 4th weekend. We have a program the previous night on Prohibition, which we'll be publicizing. But we're open most Saturdays, 1 to 4, April through December. So the only other thing I want to say, we have to be out of here by 8:30. So if it tends to ramble on and people are talking too long, we may not be able to see all the slides, but we'll try to get through as most as we can. Okay.
Oh, I guess it's my turn. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if only this will work. Okay. That's what we have tech people for. That's why I have a kid who's a computer tech. We're going to start out. First couple of slides are just going to be talking a little bit about the history of Berlin. And a lot of people may not remember or might not realize that our first name was the Great Swamp. And if you've been around during the rainy season, you know why. Actually, there was some talk initially that Kensington Center was like in an island. So, okay, if we can get back to that next one. When you think about it, we're surrounded by the Mattabesset River. It flows throughout the town, and a lot of people don't even realize that it's there. I think it's a wonderful resource. We could have done this with an overhead projector and go back about 50 or 60 years. That would have been fun. But anyway, the first inhabitants of this area were called the Wangunks. They were also called the Mattabesset. They had different names. The first European settler was Richard Beckley. And he came from New Haven and then saw that it was a nice area and settled in western Wethersfield in the area that is now behind Home Depot. A lot of Berlin was part of the town of Farmington. And then the rest came from parts of Middletown, and we even had a little bit from Wallingford. In 1686, there was a group from Farmington that came, led by Richard Seymour, and that's where Seymour Street comes from, or Seymour Road, I should say. And it was settled, they had a settlement at Christian Lane. Okay. Kensington Center. A lot of you may not realize that way back in the late 1700s, Kensington Center did not exist. And really, the biggest thing, I have this thing about roads in town, and the Hartford-New Haven path kind of snaked its way from Hartford to Weathersfield and came down Weathersfield Road to a little part of Worthington Ridge, down Patterson Way to Lower Lane, and then connected up with what we think of as Route 15. A lot of things centered around the church. The Madabassett River had a lot of industry on it along the way. George Washington was the first president, and he was the first president to visit Berlin, and that's documented in one of his diaries. I'm having a little trouble, but the biggest change was when the railroad came through in the 1830s. The initial track of the railroad was going to be around Lower Lane with a station not too far from where Willard School is. Well, the folks on Worthington Ridge didn't like that idea. They thought the trains were too noisy and too smelly and might scare the cattle. So they wouldn't sell their land, but the folks in Kensington did. And you can't see this too well, and I'll show it in a couple of other slides. This is a map from 1855, and where that blue arrow is where you would expect Main Street, Kensington to be. Well, in 1855, that road was not there, because, as I said, Kensington Center did not exist. The roads basically went from the different mills down maybe Robbins Road, Burnham Street and Christian Lane, Deming Road went over to Rocky Hill, and then they would connect up with the river, and that was the main way that goods got across. Either that or they went over to Middletown. Okay, here's another map. I'll go through these quickly, but in 1869, you can see there's Main Street is there. To the right, you can see the railroad tracks, and but there's not much else there. And here's another one. I'm just going to skip that one for now. A wonderful resource that we have is these aerial photos from 1926. We have the originals stored over at our house, our 1771 house on the ridge behind the meeting house. But these are available online on the town website. They're fabulous. This is actually Kensington Center that you can see. And this again makes it a little bit clearer. Main Street is down near the bottom right, and you can see there's not a heck of a lot there. You can see St. Paul's Church is over in the top left corner, and you can't quite see it, but over in the bottom left is KGS, Kensington Grammar School, before the high school addition was put on. And here's what town used to look like way back around the turn of the 20th century. The building on the right is Berlin Savings Bank, with Sidney Cole's grocery store next door to it. And some of the other buildings, I believe, are still there. There's a water tower that you can see in the distance that's over by the tracks. And I think this is New Britain Road. This is a bunch of people that are probably going to work. Another thing that developed along the line was the trolley line that went from New Britain down Farmington Avenue over towards Worthington Ridge. And a lot of people, if they lived in New Britain or thereabouts, would walk down this section. This is the section between Farmington Avenue and Main Street in Kensington. And they would then perhaps go to work at Paper Goods or another place that was along, but Paper Goods employed an awful lot of people. Here's another shot of the same street. And another shot of the same street. The doctor in the horse and carriage is Dr. Roger Griswold, who was very well known and very well respected. He was, I believe, first selectman for a while in the late teens and 20s. So the caption says the Dr. John and Major. I think John was the horse. And there's a dog over there that I think was Major, but I could be wrong. Don't hold me to it. This was the house that he lived in. Anybody recognize it? Yeah? Okay. Who knows? Whoops, Heidi's running. Yeah. Somebody, yeah.
I believe that's where my dentist used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Believe it or not, that's one of the oldest houses in town. I've seen it dated as early as 1690. It's next to Headmasters. Okay. It was built by Joseph Langdon, as I said, in the late 17th, early 18th century. And then was in the Langdon family until the early 20th century when the Griswolds owned it for quite some time. I can tell you a story. My mother, when she was in high school, we lived way, way down on Kensington Road, for those who don't know. But she had to go to high school in New Britain because we didn't have Berlin High until 1936. She used to ride her bike sometimes down Kensington Road and stash it in Dr. Griswold's barn and then take the trolley up to New Britain to go to high school. So that's my story. Okay. This is another building on New Britain Road, the Kensington Diner, which I honestly don't remember. I don't know, does anybody remember that one? It might have been called Zip's Diner at the time also. But it's now the location of the Animal Hospital of Berlin. Okay. Now this one, I need some help from the Italian contingent that's here. This is the Tomasi store and residence on New Britain Road. I don't remember this. I think this picture is probably from the 20s or 30s. Anybody?
Where McDonald's is now.
It's where McDonald's used to be?
Yeah.
Oh,
Tomasi's grocery store, yes, we're just about where McDonald's is, maybe one building down from there.
okay, okay. All right, that's cool.
Oh, wow. You live up on top? No, I'm just saying, for when I was very, very young, my mother and father and I lived in the apartment up above Tomasi, and yeah, we're very good friends with them.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Here's another shot of the Berlin Savings Bank. Again, I don't remember when it looks like that. I believe they changed the facade in 1949. I'm not sure.
Oh, excuse me,
Yeah.
that previous shot,
Yeah.
can you get her back? Yeah, the way it was, on the right-hand side was the original Kensington post office, and Sidney Coles was the postmaster. And next to that was Charlie Ronchetti's Meat Market, and right next to that was Guyana's General Store, and then the Berlin Savings Bank was on the left. And
Okay,
upstairs was apartments. Pop Anderson lived up there.
okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I think we have another slide that shows, yeah, this is part of the bank, and then on the other side was the post office. Yeah. This is after 1949 or 50, just judging by the cars. I think it was the early 50s. And the post office was there for a while, and then it moved a little bit further east, and for quite a while was in the building that's now occupied by the YMCA. Okay. The railroad pond. There's been a lot of talk on Facebook about the railroad pond. The pond was built for to supply water for the steam trains, and I believe it opened in either 1903 or 1904. I can't remember for sure. The house on the upper left there, you can see the remnants of it in the bottom right picture. They called this the Crowley House, and I don't know a heck of a lot about it. It burned around 1908, so it was long before any of our times. But I understand it was quite an old house. And I love this shot. This little shack-like building on the right was Pop Anderson's store. And I don't know exactly when it was built. Does anybody recall? Who remembers this building? A lot of people.
I don't remember the building itself, but it always was Pop Anderson's candy store.
Right.
We all went there, and right next to it was a barber shop. It was like a duplex building there, Nick Carson's barber shop.
Yeah. It went from Pop Anderson, and I think in the 30s or the 40s he sold it to Fagan.
That was the candy store that we all went to right from Kensington Grammar School. After school, we walked out and get a candy.
Anybody else have some recollections of that store? Look, you got somebody.
When I was in first and second grade at Ledge, the bus used to drop us off there in the morning, and we'd go in and load up with candy, and then we'd walk to Ledge School. Try that today.
Yeah, we do. Here's Pop Anderson. And I don't remember Pop Anderson, but I do remember the entrance to that store.
Somebody at a previous StoryShare said he used to sit out front in a metal chair with a fly swatter all day.
And it must have been quite the gathering place for everybody, because here we have a photo with a bunch of people, some of whom I know have relatives that are here tonight. Okay. Some other stores that were very popular, Fogliatti's grocery store on the right is now where Rich Pentor has his law office, and I think there's a relation. It was in his, it's still in the same family. And then the other building, which I remember as being Bob's Hot Dog Hut. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was owned by Frank Fogliatti back then, and he was Rick Pentori's father's uncle. And that's how Harry owned Town Food Center for years, and that's how he got it, was from his uncle.
The building on the left, they said Bob's Hot Dog Hut. It doesn't actually show Bob's, that was a duplex. That store there was originally John Puccini's shoe store before he moved across the street. But Bob's Hot Dog Cup was our hangout right next there.
Anybody else? And after a while, Johnny Pulcini moved his store over to the other side of the street next to Town and Country. Go ahead.
I was going to tell you about the hut. The shot there that you saw was, I rented that store next to the hut for a while in the 60s for a dive shop. I was selling scuba equipment. One day I was in there and Fiore Grazius comes in. He says, somebody knocked off the bank last night. Where were you? So I told him, and he had seen us at night, and he figured we might have seen something. So he's telling me about the bank. Somebody went in the bank and took the pizza money. They knocked over a bottle of red ink. I was eating red pistachio nuts that day. So Fiore says, go get your father, come down to the police station. Who are you with? I said, David Sargent. Where's he? He's lifeguard down to Hammonasset. So they go down to the beach and drive David back. And his hands are all red. So of course we didn't knock off the bank, and we straightened that all out, and that was the end of it. So, anybody remember Fiore?
We got some others? Okay. Anyway, Johnny Pulcini was very well known for, he was one of two shoe store owners in town. The other one was Paredes. And he also had sold mostly men's clothing. He was a very popular guy, very nice guy. You can see Dairy Delight or Dairy Queen in the background, and that looks like a 55 Ford behind him, but I could be wrong. Okay. Another popular place on Main Street was Freddie Ferrero's Kensington Appliances. And he was here there for quite a few years. I think he opened around 1940. And was on Main Street for quite a while until they opened the Kensington Furniture Store on Farmington Avenue. It's where Kensington, and Paredes was where Kensington Pizza is. And then next door where the Gold Place is that's where Kensington Appliance was. Am I right? Okay. That's what I thought. Okay. This is an oldie but a goodie. Farmington Avenue heading east. You can see the underpass. This is from the 1920s. The building on the right, we know it or knew it as Kensington, as Town and Country Furniture. In that day, it was the Kilby House. And the Kilby House had quite a reputation. Some say it was a house of ill repute. It was also a bar. And I think around in the 20s there were a lot of people who died from the flu in there. So across the street, you can't really see it, but they had a livery stable, and that later developed into, well, I'm going to move ahead a little bit. That later developed into Central Garage, which was run by Wes Dickinson. His son Warren was a state representative for at least one term. The Pegasus is still there. My dad and Wes Dickinson were good friends, and I spent a lot of time down there when I was a kid, when my dad was tinkering with cars. I loved that place. This was called the Triangle Diner, and this is in the same location as Dairy Queen is now. And again, you can see the Kilby House off to the right. They painted it, looks like. But, and that shot of Kensington Center, things have changed a little bit, but not a whole lot. Yeah, and of course, by that time, the Kilby House was Town and Country Furniture. Still miss that store. Okay. And when they were tearing it down, I think what happened is they ended up putting two houses together. The Kilby House originally was further down closer to where Dairy Queen is, and they moved it. And it blows me away how many times they moved big houses like that. And, you know, it was no big deal to do that. Okay. How many people remember the underpass flooding? That was just the biggest thing. Who's got a story about flooding? Come on, somebody's got to have a tall tale. No, anybody ever get stuck? The other thing with the underpass that people forget was how many times trucks got stuck underneath. You get some big 18-wheeler that thought he could make it underneath the underpass, and it just wasn't going to happen. Even back in the teens and the 20s, you used to have hay wagons that would get stuck. And if you read through some of the old New Britain Heralds, it will talk about, oh yeah, so-and-so got his hay wagon stuck again under the underpass. You had to go around. So some things just didn't change. This was from 1929. And even in I think this photo was from the 70s maybe, and it was still an issue, and was until the 90s when it was finally, they were able to repair it. The Kelly. Oh, no, I don't think so.
If you see on the other side, that was long ago the Kelly House. It was another hotel in downtown Kensington. Because the train came in there, a lot of people needed a place to stay for the night. And it's now Tavern on the Tracks. So it looks a lot different, but that house goes way back. Yeah, it was the Hollywood Bar.
You have a story to tell? You have to tell that story.
Tell the story.
Prior to the Tavern on the Tracks, there was a bar there years ago in the 70s. It was called the Hollywood. I'm sure some people remember that. And there was a woman well known in town, her name was Sahara, that would frequent that bar that I was told about. She was a businesswoman.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody recognize these people? And one of the story shares.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
That's Mr. and Mrs. Ivano, Pete Ivano and his wife. They ran
Okay.
a diner, later became the Star Restaurant, you know, over on
Okay.
Farmington Avenue, but it was up by the depot before that. Pete, and I don't know his wife's name, but they ran it, and his son Joe and Rose, his wife, ran the Star Restaurant for years.
Okay. I thought there might have been a connection, but I couldn't recall. The shot above is of the extension of Depot Road as if you're looking towards Farmington Avenue. And, you know, it's such a cool shot. Okay. And then we have the railroad station. You want to talk about railroads or?
Here's some early shots of our beloved railroad station. I get sad every time I look at pictures like this. I think the station we lost last was the third on that site, right? Two previous ones had burnt down, one by a lightning strike and one, they're not certain what it was. Electrical fire, okay. But they were quickly rebuilt, but this time, due to unknown causes, it was not rebuilt. But it was like, for many years, it was the most intact architectural railroad depot in New England on the Amtrak line. And it's an incredible loss for us that that's gone. Here's some interior pictures as we remember it. Yeah, there was a 100th anniversary of the train station in 2000, and it drew 1,000 people. It was just incredible. There were people there dressed up in costume, there was music, there was food, they brought in old trains for people to explore. It was just a wonderful event.
I think we still have some fragments of the window, but not enough to repair, unfortunately. Some of the bridges, the Seven Sisters Bridge was built somewhere around 1870, and I really love this shot. It was taken in 1907. The little dirt pathway that's right next to the bridge is what people would take if they were on the Four Rod roadside, and they would connect up to get onto, like, say, New Britain Road. And actually, Four Rod Road was the original connector to New Britain Road. You can see that very plainly on some of the old maps. And I think at the road to the right is Kensington Road, and I think that there was originally a grade crossing across the tracks at that point that went from Burnham Street over towards Main Street, and I'm not sure exactly how it went from there, but it would have been like a main drag from like Christian Lane to Porter's Pass to Burnham Street to Main Street. So here's another shot of the same thing. Okay. You know, a lot of kids, my husband tells stories about when he was delivering papers, he used to go underneath the tracks all the time to deliver papers on both sides of the tracks. Now this painting is, I believe, in the Kensington Fire District office on Farmington Avenue, and there's some controversy as to whether it says Stove Street or Grove Street, and that this was before the railroad pond was built, that this bridge went over the river at this point. I'm not sure. I don't recognize that house, although it could be that Crowley house that was burning on the other side of the railroad pond. That's a possibility. But there's a lot of questions with this picture. But he said if you want to see the original, it's over at Kensington Fire District office. So, I still have such fond memories of this building. The part that's closest to us, the Grove Street side, of course, was the original Kensington Grammar School. and the part behind it was the original Berlin High School. Somebody, I think, has a story about that. About a proposal? Okay, if you want to share, that's fine. If not, that's all right. But the KGS was actually built as a consolidated school. Before that, the schools in town, we had 9 school districts, and each one was pretty much autonomous. And then around the early 20th century, they started with this idea that each town should have a centralized Board of Education. There was a lot of politics going on and surrounding that. A lot of people had very strong feelings one way or the other. The thought of having a school right in this location was that, number one, maybe someday we'll have a high school and this would be a good location for it. And the reason for that was because you had the train station right down the street. Kids from East Berlin and Beckley could hop on the train and get here in no time. Kids from Worthington could hop on the trolley and get here in no time. And kids in Kensington, that was close enough to walk for a lot of people. So a lot of us spent a lot of time in this building. Some of us actually went to high school here. I had first grade in that first room on the right, and I know there's a couple of my classmates that were there too. So my mom went to this school for most of the time, and then she came back and taught. In the 30s, it was a hard time to be building an addition for a school, but we did it. And the first class, what they did was they were already going up to 9th grade, and then every year they added a year. And then finally in 1936, they graduated their first class. So, and we've had a high school ever since, and boy, this is a big change from what they had to deal with KGS. KGS initially didn't even have interior plumbing. They didn't have interior bathrooms until the high school addition was added in the 30s. So, going down Main Street a little bit more, we're going to come to this little building called Tab Hall. It's not there anymore. You can see kind of from the bottom right picture, you can kind of get a perspective of where it was. It actually, the location is now where Richisitko is. But it was, first it was the church hall for St. Paul's. And then it later became Zotter's Garage before it became Sit Rich's. A little further west was the original St. Paul's Church, which was built in 1878. And they probably put it there because you had the factory right there, and that's where a lot of the Irish immigrants were living, was that area. So a lot of those families are still there. We have descendants of some of the original families that still live in town. You can see the location of that is about where the parking lot is for Sherwood, the lofts at Sherwood Falls. But the houses to the left of there are still there. So, American Paper Goods is one of our, I can't say founding factories. The location, there's been something on that site since as early as 1712. There was a mill that was owned by the Bronson family at that location, and they're probably the original ones who dammed up the pond. of what we call paper goods pond. You can see the difference on the American Paper Goods Company was established in 1891, and they are well known for paper cups and the Amphora cups. They're still around, and every once in a while you'll see one in a movie set. The photo on the bottom right is what we kind of remember. I believe that little thing that's in the middle of the street, I believe, was a pump. And I don't know how long it was there for, but I think they got tax credits for having the pump there. This is an old photo from around the 1870s. And I believe when this was taken, it was owned by Hart, Blyven and Mead, which was a predecessor to the American Paper Goods. These buildings all burned, I think it was around 1890, just before. There were a couple of different factories that were there, and there was a huge fire there in 1890, and then the fallout from that was when American Paper Goods was built. You had an awful lot of people who worked there. Anybody have some stories of paper goods? I remember going there as a kid. Okay, we'll get you. Pam's running. Hold on.
I just wonder if this part of paper goods, does it run up Burnsville Avenue?
Not really. It's right on the corner. It goes up, the bridge is right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you take a left and it goes, and the left is Percival Avenue. That's where it starts.
Because I remember as a kid, the American Paper Goods, my mother used to work there at the pump factory.
Yeah.
And we used to ice skate all
Yep.
down by the bridge.
Yep.
Remember, they built up that bridge?
Yep.
That was so much fun.
Yeah.
I wonder how many of these people, if they ever went there.
I bet you a lot of us did. I remember going skating there. Yeah.
Used to build the bonfires right on the ice.
Yeah. Can't do that this winter. And this is just a cool shot of the pond. I think this is Jonathan T. Hart, who owned the factory there for many, many years. He was a prominent businessman in town. And he built a house on Copper Beach, which is still there. And I think the idea was he wanted to be able to see his factory from the house. So, and that's in the area of, it's behind Robindale Drive and off of Hart Street. And this is just a photo of the dam, the paper goods dam. Okay, this is probably one of the bridges that people remember. This is an old one. Do you want to tell Kathy's story, or do you want to?
I know for a long while it was a wooden bridge, and one of our members remembers, because she grew up around that area, that there was a big hole in it, and kids would fish through the hole. There wasn't much traffic, I guess, that they could do that. But I often, when I drive down here in season, I see people fishing off it still. Does anybody fish? It's the bridge in front of Paper Goods on Percival Avenue. Yeah, the old bridge.
Yeah, I think this is the old bridge. Yeah, because I think a few years after this was taken, this is what happened. Yeah. So, and then I think it was replaced by it was like a Berlin iron bridge type with the trusses above. That I remember. Okay, here's another aerial map. And the reason why I wanted to show this, this again is Kensington Center. You can see Main Street off near the top left. And kind of right in the middle is Burnham Street. And where it crosses Farmington Avenue and turns into Porter's Pass, you can see, looks like a big pond, and that's because it was a big pond. That's now where CVS is. I forget which, man, do you remember which brickyard? Was it Murray? Berlin brick? Okay. And another thing that you can, if you look hard, okay, this, you see the pond, and then the street is Farmington Avenue. Oh, let me shake. Yeah, that whole area. Yeah. Nan, stay there for a second. Can you see, if you look on just to the left of Farmington Avenue, you can see the remnants of the old racetrack from the Berlin Fair. Can you see it? Yeah, it's an oval. Yeah. That is the old racetrack from the old Berlin Fairgrounds. Now, at this time, in 1926, it had been 6 years since they stopped having the Berlin Fair, and they didn't restart it again until 1949 in a different location. But that whole area from the crossroads of Burnham Street and Farmington Avenue all the way down to Lower Lane and west to the river, that was all the fairground, the original Berlin Fairgrounds. It was the Connecticut State Fair for many years during the late 1800s, early 1900s. And we're still trying to figure out why they stopped. I think there was a couple of reasons. One is because they lost the status of being the state fair, and also in 1920 you had it was a horrible snowy winter. I figure that's 100 years ago, and I believe, okay, I'll get to that in a second, but I'll come back to that thought. But Mary's Bakery, there was a 5 and 10 there at one time also. And this is one of Dr. Fitzsimmons' paintings. Yeah, yeah. And the original Kensington Fire Department that's still there. That's Joel's hair salon now. This building is still here. Let's hope nothing happens to that one. I heard somebody wanted to put an art gallery in there. I thought that would be awesome. Okay. How many remember this one? Yeah? Okay.
John Andrews Warehouse, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right next to Rabbinic Speech Store.
Yeah, you can see Levinix in the background. Yeah, that burned down. I think it was in the 60s or the 70s. I forget when. 70s? Okay. Does anybody remember this house? Wish I could give a prize for... It's not here anymore. But do you know where it was? Walgreens is there right now. Okay? This house was probably built in the early 1700s. It was built by Deacon Thomas Hart. Before 1730 at least. And it was right on that corner right where Walgreens is now. It was torn down. The Simeone family, I think, lived there up until the 50s, and then it was demolished to put in a little plaza that included Driscoll's Pharmacy. Let's see, Johnny's Pizza was there, Val's Hair Design. There was Kensington Provision was there. What else? Anybody? What am I missing? Anyway. Okay, this is a shot from Farmington Avenue. You can see the old house in the background. But Mott's Cozy Corner was another little place that was there for a little while. Long before our time, I'm sure. But the Ritchie family, I think, lived there or owned that. Okay. Back to the Berlin Fair. The fair has a long history in town. This particular shot was from the racetrack. You can see the viewing stand off to the right, and you're looking north towards Porter's Pass. They had harness racing there. A lot of people would race their horses there, and they used it also for parades. This is what happened 100 years ago tomorrow. This photo was taken. At least 3 buildings collapsed because of all the snow. The winter between 1919 and 1920 was extremely heavy snow, and a lot of the buildings, I guess, had flat roofs, or the snow wasn't removed from the roofs. So you had at least 3 buildings that collapsed. This might have been a chicken shed, I forget. There was also a merchant's building, and I forget what other one was there. To be replaced after World War I with Victory Market, which was opened by the Scagliotti family in honor of our victory in World War I. And they owned it up through, what, the 70s? 70s or 80s? It's been Kensington Market for a while, but the building itself really hasn't changed that much. So, interesting, the main entrance for the Berlin Fair was right around here. So that hasn't changed a whole lot. Who is this gentleman?
Charlie Giannone.
You got it. Can you tell us a story?
Well, he was a contractor, local contractor, businessman. He's the one that started filling in all the ponds along Farmington Avenue. The first pond, he filled enough dirt in just to build a package store. That's how that whole business area along Farmington Avenue started, but he did a lot of work. They wanted to name that park after him at one time, but they ended up putting it on as a volunteer park.
I've heard it called Giannone's Folly, because everybody thought he was nuts. I guess not so much. Okay. This is looking north towards Porter's Pass. And includes, I think that's, some of that is right where Stop and Shop is now. But the plaza started with just a few little buildings. There's the package store up by the left, and then you have Claire's, and oh, everybody remembers Claire's. Can we have a nice fish store in town? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. And I can't remember if that's a barber shop. Hmm? Yeah.
There used to be a laundromat there, too.
Yep,
And then Cumberland Farms.
yep. Yeah, that was when the newer, okay, I'll get there in a second. But I mean, I don't know how many times I went through this to get over to Porter's Pass before the parking lot was paved. But Dr. Banford was the first dentist that I know of. And you can see Deep House in the background. And of course, that little building is still there. Okay. Another shot of Farmington Avenue looking east. Yeah, nice trees there. And again, looking kind of north, Dr. Banford's office, and then the Sunoco station, and I think there's, yeah, the little plaza with the Cumberlands and the, yeah. Okay. Any stories? Any takers? Okay. Okay. So now, I don't know how long the Sunoco station was there, but then after they went out, there was a little veggie store that was in there for a while. They had nice produce. Okay. Frank's Diner was just a little bit past Dieter's, I believe. You can kind of see, I think this was the same diner, but, and I think you can see Dieter's, or it later became Mary's Pastry. And the building is still there, but it's greatly changed. And there's now another plaza there. Stop and Shop. How you've changed. All right. Any stories? No? Okay. You're a quiet crowd tonight. Okay. And we're getting down to Farmington Avenue Garage. I don't know a lot about this. Come on, some of you guys. Okay.
Farmington Avenue Garage, it's on the corner where Mysterio Drive goes in.
Yeah.
Much Mysterio, I don't know what his first name is, but we call him Much. He ran that body shop in the garage.
Yeah.
That's where it is. Or was.
And same place. I used to get this one in Central Garage confused until Bobby Giorgini straightened me out. But you can see it must have been built in the 20s because you can see just the architecture above the sign there, above the central sign that's so typical of like 1920s architecture. Okay. And here's, I remember the Getty gas station. Okay. Interesting. Okay, that's the same place. It's on the corner of like Mysterio Drive and Mill Street / Farmington Avenue. You say the building's not there anymore. It's the Citgo station is there now. So, okay. And that's it. Okay. All right. One of the things that a lot of people have talked about on Facebook is the old Yankee Peddler days that we used to have, and we used to have block dances in Kensington Center. And those were so much fun. The only bad thing about them is so many times it was so blooming hot that that was tough. But that's about it. Does anybody have any stories about the block dances or the Yankee Peddler days? Come on, guys. You're being too quiet.
Yeah, I remember the block things. McCune used to bring,
Can you speak up a little bit, Gary?
McCune Brothers used to bring a trailer up and park it next to the White Bank and put a band on it. And, closed the center of town off. One time there was a train parked up on the underpass. It was used in a movie in Connecticut. So we went up and stole everything out of it. And the block parties were great. The kids were, it was before our beer drinking days, so it was still innocent. Eventually we grew up and took over the center of town. I'll tell you about it later.
You know, one thing I thought we had a picture in here of is the old Kensington pharmacy that Mill Abrams ran, and it had a soda fountain in it. It was so cool. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. Anybody have any stories about it?
Just a story about Mill. 1978 or 9, he was in the New Britain Herald, picture of him, and he was standing next to Amanda Blake, and she was Miss Kitty on the Gunsmoke movies, television program. And that's it. Remember him? He was in a Lions Club. Nice guy.
I think he was in the Berlin Playhouse or some amateur theater group too.
I used to work at Kensington Pharmacy when it was a soda place. We had 3 booths in there, and the kids used to come down there after school and hang around there all the time. And we had a big soda fountain there. We used to have to make our own soda from down in the basement. We would have to make simple syrup with machines. It was very interesting there. That's when cigarettes were 17 cents a pack.
At pharmacy, Mill Abrams, just for a matter of information, Bill Driscoll was the pharmacist there. They had a falling out, and so Bill built his own drugstore up the line after. Ruby Giannotti worked behind the soda fountain. You know, some old names.
Wow, I didn't know that, Mr. Maselli, because I just always thought Driscoll's Pharmacy was just another pharmacy. I didn't know that they had worked together. You know, we had a lot of independent pharmacies in town. Can anybody name some of them? Yeah. At the Berlin Pharmacy, Driscoll's, Kensington, Community Drug, Ferndale, and now we have CVS and Walgreens.
I don't know if you can still do it, but you used to be able to go into the old Kensington Pharmacy and pay your phone bill and your light bill. There was a little counter way down on the back near where the pharmacist was. And you'd go in there and pay your phone bill and your light bill. And gas.
Joni's mother.
They also sold liquor back then in the drugstores, hard liquor. I worked for Driscoll's Drugstore Sodager for a long time. And on Sundays, they would put up a screen so you couldn't buy any liquor on Sundays.
You know, it's the kind of thing that, you know, 20 years from now, nobody will ever remember that you couldn't buy liquor on Sunday. And they'll think, what? Or that stores were closed on Sunday, you know. Is there any place else in Kensington that you can think of? I know we haven't talked about, the Historical Society is in the old Peck Library, and I know a lot of people tell stories about going there as kids and getting ice cream and then sitting out on that ledge that looks like it's going to fall over now.
We used to go to Pop Anderson's store and get candy after school and sit on the ledge and then go in, and Mr. Devlin would be in Peck Library we'd have to go in there, we'd go in there after.
Yeah, this is kind of funny, but the museum has been in there since 1993, and yet we still, every year, have at least one person comes in and says, oh, I thought this was the library. And how could you not know we have a new library? You know? Anything else? I know when we do this at the senior center, we go overtime because so many people are talking. You guys are kind of quiet. We're older. We have memories. Was there somebody over here?
I used to belong to the Kensington art group, and we used to paint in the red house up near the town hall and where the library is now. And then we moved because the old schoolhouse was too old for us to stay there because of the odors and what have you. And then in 1963, I met my husband, and he used to travel up from North Carolina, from Camp Lejeune, and he would come up through New York, Manhattan, and he'd hop onto the train to come and visit me. And in 64, we got engaged. In 65, we got married. And I did a painting of the old railroad station a few years back. And we had good memories. He passed on this year, or this past year, a month ago. But we have good memories of when he used to come up to the railroad station and I would go and pick him up.
Somebody else?
Yeah, I just want to say it's really nice to be here. My mom grew up in Kensington, and after she, met my dad, moved to Meriden, they started a family down there. But we used to come up to Kensington to visit the folks, and there was a Mary's Bakery near the tracks that had white cream filled donuts in it. If anybody has that recipe, we could make some money, I think. That was the highlight of coming to Kensington, white cream filled donuts. We'd get them on the way in, but you couldn't open it until you got there. So that's just my memory. We used to skate on the pond. She used to bring us up skating on the pond. We used to go to Willowbrook Park and stuff like that. So.
How about, does anybody remember Red and White Store? Grocery store?
My neighbor next door used to work at Mary's Bakery. So I'm sure she does have old recipes from there. I'll try and get them to you.
We were talking about the red and white store.
Yes, the red and white store. Well, in my youngest years, grew up on Carver Lane. And so the red and white store was in walking distance, and of course it's near the Paper Goods Pond. And the highlight that I remember mostly, well, a couple things, but one, every winter, I swear, Paper Goods Pond froze enough that you could ice skate on. And we used to have ice carnivals. And they were the highlight of my growing up in that area. And then we lived on Carver Lane, and we backed up to the paper company place and stuff like that. In my backyard, there was this fence that, because the water went down, and I was forbidden to go beyond that fence. Well, when nobody was looking, of course, us and the neighborhood kids, there was a crack in the fence down a ways, and we'd go down through there because we needed to catch those frogs for the frog jumping contest.
Going back to the picture where you had the old Berlin Savings Bank with apartments on top, my grandfather used to live in one of those apartments, and I don't know if he was a constable yet, but he might have been. But anyways, one of his jobs was to go downstairs and clean the bank before it opened. But one day he went down there, and there were like 3 or 4 people ready to rob the bank. So they tied him up, They tied them, didn't hurt them, fortunately. They tied them up, and the funny thing is, I think they caught the robbers like in 2 days. In 3 days, they were in jail. They were all, took them 1 day to prosecute them to get them in jail. That story's in one of the old Herald pieces too.
Yeah, I think somebody shared that at one of our other story shares, and we have the notes written down about that, but it was in the paper. We had another one, I don't know if it was the same bank robbery, but you know how the money has a die with it or something? Well, somebody, I guess, threw the bag of money out of the window of a car or something, and this guy picked it up innocently and turned it in. But
There was one too that they robbed the bank, but they found them by following their footprints in the snow. Yeah.
I just want to say, Tom DeVivo, but my dad had a farm out on Edgewood Road, and we had many chickens, and we used to have egg customers. And I know one customer we had was this place, Hart's Bakery, which was on the corner, I think it's Woodruff Street, and they made some great donuts there. I remember.
yeah, the place is a house now, but we have some, I guess it was like farther up from downtown, so we didn't include it in this slideshow, but people rave about the donuts they got there. Oh, it would have been their 100th anniversary. And there was another bakery, Buckley Bakery. Does anybody remember that? I think it was on Grove Street or Allen Street. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a couple stories about the center of town. First one, the White Bank. I don't know the name of it now.
It's New Britain National.
Britain National. Well, I don't know if this story is true, but it went around Berlin for a long time. They had a night deposit, like where you would put letters in your house or whatever that is. And the businesses that were depositing late at night could just put it in this depository. And the story was that somebody went down there one night, they made a fake one, glued it to the wall next to the original one, put out a service sign on the original one, and probably made a few bucks. I knew a couple of kids who had new cars the next week. By the 1960s, the kids had taken over the center of town. It was a big hangout. There'd be 5, 6, 7 cars in front of the Star barber shop. Another 5, 6 cars, 10 cars in front of Puccini's. There were 2 groups of kids, all teenagers, young adults. At that time, everybody was drinking. The police figured if we were all in one spot, they didn't have anything to worry about. Puccini's, kids were sitting around throwing the beer cans on the roof. Puccini's had a flat roof. One time it rained, beer cans got stuck in the drain. Next morning there was a ring of beer cans right around the whole building. So we went over and helped them clean it up. So the same thing was happening over at the Star. There was beer cans in the bushes, and so finally we went to Rolling Products, got some 55-gallon drums, painted them yellow, stenciled on the side of it, Young Adult Athletic Club of Berlin. And we stuck one in front of Puccini's, one in front of the Star, one at Dodson's. Once a week we'd go down with J. Ross's truck, pick up the beer cans and take them to the dump. So you had the bunch in front of Puccini's and a bunch in front of the Star. We all knew each other, we all went to school, there's no problems. So a decision was made at one time to merge the 2 groups. And then we started all hanging around together again and partying and took Berlin over. One time there was going to be an argument. A couple of kids at the Berlin Fair argued with a couple of kids from New Britain who were in the Lord's Club. So there was going to be a fight, big fight in Berlin. And the Lords were going to come to Berlin and fight the kids at down the center. Well, the kids from Berlin got a hold of a box truck, and they stuck it down in front of the bank and put about 20 kids in the truck waiting for the Lords to come. The Lords came down. I don't know if most of you must be familiar with the Lords in Britain. It was a bunch of hoods, but they weren't really bad. They sent a car down to check out Berlin. There was nobody around, so they left. And we were going to attack them as soon as they came around the corner. But that was it. We hung around there for a number of years. One kid got into my mother's car. My mother had a Chevy Super Sport convertible, and he backed it up by accident and smashed the in front of Star Barber Shop. There were green panels, and they were glass. He backed the car into the green panel and smashed it. So the next day we went down and we all chipped in and bought Tony a new glass panel for his building. But that was it. We hung around there for years, and then hung around Dotson's. The bypass was being built, so of course everybody was on the bypass before it was open. Kids were going up and down there 80, 90 miles an hour. Drag racing and everything. Berlin got a little out of control for a few years. And then when I moved away, it was all better.
Gary mentioned Dotson's. Does that have any memories for anybody? Well, is Judy here? Oh. Yeah, I think if nobody has more to say, I think we're going to wrap this up, but we have Judy wants to make an announcement.
We'd like to thank Judy Michalski and the Adult Ed Department for hosting us. Okay, one more comment.
I want to ask anybody here remember there was a place, believe me, they used to make clay pots.
Keller Pottery.
What is it?
Keller Pottery. It was on 4 Rod Road.
They had a big pile of dirt in a hallway. I took my Cub Scouts there, and we watched them make clay pots. And that's what people use for planters and whatever now. But I remember the guy used to throw the pots up in the air and listen, and then he could tell if one had a crack in it. And that winter, he would take it out, and then it was go out and be sold.
That was before plastic.
I guess. But still, there's so much to talk about this town, about Kensington and Berlin. I don't know why people are not expressing, like she mentioned Johnson. Everybody stopped in Johnson. I mean, my God, they had the best cheeseburgers in town.
I was the last foreman of the production department that made the flower pots. Before I left, they moved to Michigan.
Oh, my goodness. There's so many good things to talk about. There's the town. Right there. Oh, hi.
I'm amazed that people didn't mention the old Lions Club pool, the Lions Pool.
Yeah, the memorial.
I took all 3 of my daughters there from the time they were born until it closed, and have good memories of that one.
We did have that at another StoryShare.
You know, this story share is mostly just for downtown. We have done a lot in other parts of town.
Can anybody tell me how Four Rod Road got its name? I've looked up what the distance of a rod is, and it doesn't look anything like that street.
A rod is 16.5 feet. Yeah, and I think it was the width of the road, because you had a lot of, there were a lot of, a long time ago, you had different widths of roads, and it was, they would be, there was a 10-rod highway, there was a 20-rod highway, which I think was Edgewood Road. There were some other ones that are described in land records, but Four Rod Road is the only one that still keeps the name, the old name. But I'm pretty sure it was the width of the road.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. Thank you. My daughter and I, we're both really new to Kensington, and worked in Central Connecticut for a very long time though. I have a question for all of you. I've explored the area where we live, which is in, around Rosario Drive. The quarries. I explored them, I fished them, I biked them. In the 3 years that we've been in this town, we love this town. It's so nice to get to hear some of the history. Does anybody could share anything on that? We'd really appreciate that.
Which are you talking about?
The quarries right next to CBS on both sides of Route 9. There's actually you can see a flag coming out of what looks like one of the cranes from back in the day. I see a lot of remnants of bricks in my exploration in the area. Maybe somebody could.
These are all old brickyard ponds. The brick industry started back in the 1840s and really started taking off in the late 1800s through the early 1900s, and they all kind of went the way of the dinosaur after the Depression. But most of those are from digging clay. The crane. Nancy, where are you?
Yeah, Nancy.
Huh? Want to talk about the crane?
Well, yes, the iconic crane on Route 9. Everyone, I'm sure, is familiar when you're driving Route 9 north and you see the boom of a crane sticking out of the water. That's the old Carbo Brick Company clay pit. And Carbo had purchased an electric shovel, that's what it was called, and went out of business, and the clay pit eventually filled in. So now what we have left, I don't know how many people I know who will say, what is that thing in the water? Well, that's what it is. It's the old clay. It's the old boom of an electric shovel that was used to dig clay.
Yeah, I would like to say thank you to the woman back there that mentioned the old memorial pool. If anybody goes by Norton Road, all the way out to... But anyway, memorial pools, we used to have a swimming team down there. People came, we walked down there. It was amazing. And then when my daughter got married and had children, they went to the memorial pool because it was sandbanks and water and whatnot. Now it's just a puddle, the houses on it.
I was going to tell you a couple stories about the pool. I told this before at one of these meetings, but maybe some of you are new. I was a lifeguard there for a long time. And I would go down in the morning to teach swimming. Parents would drop their kids off before I got there. So I got there one day and I come down, open the front gates, go into the second set of gates, open the gates. It's about 10 kids down at the lower end of the pool. I walk in the gates and the kids come running and they're screaming. And they come running toward me and they ran right past me. So I said, uh-oh. So I go down the lower end. The swim team had gone down the night before, found some bones from an old cow. Put the bones on the beach and made footprints from a monster coming out of the water up to the bones and back into the water. Kids were not amused. One time, Park and Rec would come down at the end of the season for a day. In August, late August. It was real hot this year, this particular year, and the Park and Rec were going to come down with several busloads of kids. Swim team went down the night before and let the water out of the pool. It was empty. The water used to refill itself every 24 hours. Anybody remember Dave McCain? There was a pipe that went down on the west side of the pool. So when the pool was emptied, the water would just go down a pipe and come out underneath the Norton Road. So Dave McCain decides he's going to go through the pipe one day. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull the boards out of the pipe, let the water take him and a flutter board through the pipe. It's about 200 yards long. So away he goes, and the pipe rifles him all the way through. He comes out the other end a bloody mess. So,
Thank you, Gary. That's enough.
I remember the bar on the snapping turtles. Went in there, you saw snapping turtles. It was fast. And one night, Dave McCain.
Hi, everybody. I'm Judy Michalski. I'm the Director of Adult Ed here in Berlin. I just want to say thank you for participating tonight in our first collaboration with the Historical Society. And I'd like to thank everyone from the Historical Society for this great presentation that they put on. As many of you know, the Historical Society is restoring the Worthington Meeting House on the Ridge. This house is nearly 250 years old. It's been a church, it's been a school, it was home to the Berlin Board of Education until 1971. The town of Berlin owns that building, but with the budget constraints, they can't put a full restoration in process right now. So the Historical Society is raising funds and getting grants to restore this beautiful historic site. When it is complete, it will be home to the Berlin Historical Society and a cultural center. Berlin Adult Ed would like to present to the Historical Society this check for $250. And on your way out, on the back table, we have a little donation box if you'd like to put something in there for them. I'm sure they would appreciate it. Again, thank you all for coming tonight.
Judy, thank you so much. We really appreciate anything that can help us to achieve this goal.
There's nothing there. I gave the keys up.
Playground or something.
Oh yeah, that's all there is. But the inside, we had our paintings. And we dissolved the art league. We gave